Set Life. I'm Amber Buto.
I'm Kelly Lachey.
And today we are sitting with Arturo Olmos. And I had to practice that. I'll be straight honest with you beforehand because I think I butcher some of those names pretty regularly.
He's not almost Arturo. He's Arturo Olmos.
Yes. See? And this is why we had a debate.
To make your mama proud, Arturo Olmos.
I love that. I only could aspire to do that.
Yes.
But yes, welcome. And we are so glad to have you on set with us today and to hear your story and your journey in this industry and all the great things that you're doing in it. A lot of the things that we like to do here is start with, how did you get in this industry? Like, what brought you here?
I feel like there's a few moments that got me here. Fast forwarding, one of the most important ones for me was meeting a mentor who showed me everything that I wouldn't have learned or that I didn't learn essentially in art school. I went to Pratt, great school. But a lot of the feeling I had there was that they, would spit these kids out, and a lot of the kids would think they're going to be represented by a gallery. Yeah. And so for me, it was leaving art school and realizing like, oh, the real world, right? And so for me, a lot of it was doing a lot of jobs that I didn't necessarily love, but did help me understand the industry more. So a lot of photo assisting, being in people's way, but also like meeting a few photo assistants that would show me the way. And a big moment was meeting my mentor, João. So having met João was important because it's really hard to find people in the industry that will really take you under their wing. Yeah. And even more specifically, will introduce you to their clients and will root for you when you shoot for their clients.
True.
Yeah.
And so it was really important for me to be on set when somebody wanted me to do a coffee run. He would just be the kind of guy that's, oh, he doesn't do that. Like he's here with me to help me light this or to help me shoot this. Yeah. And so it was important to first realize like, this is a world that I want to be a part of. But more importantly, to have a really great example of a mentor, because as I move on in the industry, the way that I feel like I can give thanks is to give back myself. So good. Is to help other people who might not have a mentor and explain to them, in the ways that they can navigate it and find ways to not just work, but to, even if they're not working for money, to do work that is fulfilling to them, because ultimately that comes inevitably if you're making work that you truly care about.
Yeah.
Good.
That's so great. We've set with quite a few people now on Set Life, and not very many have had the opportunity that you've had to have a great mentor. It's kind of our heart behind this. We meet a lot of people being in the industry. We get to sit and become friends with the likes of you and the other guests that we've had on here. And, we ham it up around here and we talk. And that's kind of the birth of this was, oh my gosh, if everybody could just listen in to all the conversations and the craziness that goes on here and all the stories we tell and how we all got started. I mean, that's what we do around here all the time while we're just hanging out on set. That was kind of the birth of why we wanted to give back to the community with this type of podcast. For you to be able to have a mentor in your life and in your career, what a blessing. What a props back to who mentored you. That's just really great to hear. You to have that to come up into. So once you were mentored and taught through him. Oh, and the other thing that I think is so great that he was talking about with his mentor, because I think this is so important, how we treat people on set and how it's a common thing where everybody has said, like, you got to move on from being a PA and move up. At some point in your career, you got to go, okay, I'm not doing PA work anymore. I'm going to now become whatever you're shooting towards. I'm going to make the next step up. But to have a mentor that's like, hey, he's PA'd enough, like he's done that. This is where he's refining this skill.
Sure. And it's not, and of course, not that there's anything, of course, wrong starting as a PA, because it gives you an opportunity to get on a set, to see what you're inspired by, because there's so many positions. What do you want to direct? Do you want to produce? You want to be, DP? Where's your lane? So in some ways that experience just getting around is a good first, step, him just getting you out there. Did you immediately know when you were around him where your position would be or where you'd find yourself in that?
I think what was most illuminating working with him was that I discovered a whole new world of making work. Before I met him, I'd always thought, well, one, it was humbling. I always thought I was like, hot stuff. I'd see people shooting on sets and I'd always think, oh, I can do that. But working with him, alongside him, from say creative calls all the way up until we're on set actually making the work, I realized that this is a whole different space of making work. It wasn't like, something that they call you and you show up to set the next day and you just shoot it. It was like carrying on an entire project for a really big company where, they're spending millions of dollars for you to shoot for an hour potentially with a celebrity. And so I realized that there was a whole lucrative side of photography specifically that I didn't know existed. And so having worked with him, having seen all of the things that you have to do to get there was humbling for me, because it was like, oh, you don't know anything.
Right.
And you're lucky enough that this person is willing to teach you. And, I have a lot of friends that I love helping out in the industry all the time. They'll call me, hey, I'm bidding on this job. What do I do? And they didn't have that advantage. And I definitely consider it an advantage to have someone, show you the way.
Yeah.
We still work together, which is kind of incredible too. And it's become this synergistic relationship where he always wanted to do video. I always wanted to do video. But because he showed me all the photo stuff, now I'm always helping him out with a lot of video stuff.
Yeah.
And so
Cool.
it's just been a really incredible relationship.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Man, I love it.
Yeah, I do too. That's so great. So you go through school, get a mentor, you learn photography first.
Yeah, actually, so it's a little bit longer too. I think the first time I really worked with the camera was in 7th grade. Again, another transitionary moment when I went to New York for the first time because of a T-Shirt America teacher. His name was Christopher Idy. They also gave our school a grant, and they bought these XL1 and XL2 Canon cameras.
Yeah.
I remember the XL1 and the XL2.
And at the time, they were cutting edge, little DV tapes.
Mini DV.
Oh, yeah. And they gave us computers, and we had no idea what to do with this. But they were in our school, and so I thought, if nobody else is going to use these, I'll work with them. And that's when it first, bit me in terms of doing something creative with something, techie.
Yeah.
For me, that felt good. But it wasn't until high school that I realized that without a lot of the resources that you need to be a director or to make your own films, you need a really big crew, and a lot of the time. And so the way that I went about it instead was I went to photography to develop a voice for myself, knowing that the end goal was always going to be just directing films. And so when I went to school for photography, learned a lot of the things in school that were more like art history related. The important things that I learned there were mostly related into being able to look at your own work and being able to apply something a little bit more than just something that looks good, but being able to apply art history to it, being able to make an entire project that actually has substance and meaning and could change the world or could change, a very particular niche hobby for some people. For me, one of those projects was highlighting my own neighborhood that I grew up in called Manchester. Surrounded on 3 sides by refineries, lower income area that's usually kind of ignored, but is just kind of strange. And I grew up in it, so it's really easy to grow up in a place and not really focus on things. But having gone to art school and going back and realizing there's a lot of things here that are not okay, and meeting the people and photographing them, it became a story that felt like it was bigger than myself.
Yeah.
And so when I first did that project, I realized that I always wanted to be making stories that were bigger than myself, that I could wake up the next day and the next day knowing that even if I feel tired, it's not about me anymore. Now it's about this project and I have to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. And in that art though, art just hits differently. Art, I'm sure all of that schooling opened your eyes to see the world differently, to see the to read between the lines, to see the subtext. It's not surface. Art's not surface level. I mean, you see what you see, but that's not the art. It's everything, the meaning behind it. That's one of my favorite things about art. I mean, frankly, that's why I love directing. That's why I love filmmaking. You know, it's not, there's people who make really surface level pieces, but it doesn't hit the same way. It's usually not the stuff that most people are interested in because it's very shallow. Their subtext isn't there. You know, the old saying in Hollywood is, if the scene is about what the scene looks like it's about, well, in more colorful language, they say you're out of luck.
Yeah.
But it's the point is, if there's no gravitas, there's no subtext, what are they really saying? What are they really meaning? Now, audiences today, they're trained in so much subtext, they have no idea it's even, if I were to talk to them about this, they wouldn't even know. They're just, no, I love that movie. Oh, it's about this guy and this guy. It's like, is that really what it's about? Right. And then they'd know what you're talking about, but they just haven't discovered the language for it. Right. Art does that. Yep. Art school did that. It could help you see that neighborhood. And I love that. That's what I loved about, right when we first met, I could tell you're a director. I'm a director. And I could tell someone who was interested in another level. There's a lot of directors. There's a lot of directors who are just happy to go shoot nice imagery, happy to go shoot, whatever it is. Yeah. I know that you're a people person. I know that people have impacted your life. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's why you direct from that place, because you've been so impacted by that. You've stopped to smell the roses, to reflect on the whys. And I can see you giving that back, even in your trade. You've talked about who you work with and the things like that. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what's important in your art? First of all, let me just say this. So Arturo is well, you tell them everything that you just, I know you don't want to talk, and who wants to sit here and talk about themselves?
Right,
But I mean, you have done a ton of editorial work, a lot of advertising agency work, both photography, both filming, both directing, et cetera. Am I right around those? Going the right direction? Is there a better way you would describe that I'm not saying?
Yeah, no, I mean,
you're an artist.
Thank you. I've been really fortunate that I get to shoot for a lot of really incredible brands through ad agencies. And a lot of that is, through a rep that I work with in LA called Giant Artists. It's a very synergistic relationship in that, we bring each other work. And so it's kind of like they say, it's like dating. Yeah. And so through them, we shoot for some really cool brands, global ad campaigns, T-Mobile, Chase, and a lot of the editorial work is where a lot of my heart is, in the sense, because even though editorial doesn't necessarily pay a lot, the goal for editorial, which I think a lot of photographers get wrong, is not to make money. It's to make something that is unique and special, and to be able to pair that with a story that potentially includes a really great writer, is again reaching at that, this is bigger than you. And a lot of the mood boards that I get when I'm shooting big ad jobs or commercial jobs, you'll see that editorial work in there. Most art directors aren't going to put in a mood board that you're shooting for an ad campaign stuff that you've already shot for another major ad client,
Would you do me a favor? And this is just for people watching who might not know all of our language per se. Kind of define for them a little bit editorial and what that kind of means for you in your world.
Yeah, I guess it's a good question to ask too, because editorial can mean a lot of different things to other people. The way I define it is it's work that you make for, say, for example, a magazine or an online magazine, or potentially even just smaller clients in general, where it's either going to get published online or published in a book somewhere. But I also consider it if it's work that you make on your own time. I think one of the best things that anybody can do for their own career is when they're not making work for money. And so I was talking about this earlier with Kelly, that in a lot of my treatments, the way I set myself aside when I'm bidding against other photographers or directors is I go crazy on my treatments. I really, really nurture them. I make them personal, but I also even test shoot for my treatments. So if a client is supposed to open this up and they have to decide on whether to award me the job or not, it's going to be a little bit different if they can see work from their own, whether it's their own product or service that they offer that they've never seen before.
Yeah.
And if I can make the time, however busy I am, to test shoot for that and let them know, hey, you know, like this is a little bit of what the work might look like. Or even if it's not the same style that you're providing for them, even if it's just like in a studio and you shoot this product for them, to show that you care enough to create a few images just for the treatment.
Yeah.
That could sometimes be, you know, the
Deal
next
breaker.
yeah, absolutely. For me, a big thing for in regards to editorial is that for me feeds the big ad jobs that I want to shoot. I think, and I don't mean to sound like that I don't need every ad job that comes my way because it's great money.
Sure.
But what's important too is that you're shooting ad jobs that you really care about, that fit your style, because not only you can do those better than somebody else can, but that continues this kind of like avalanche effect of you getting that same work.
Yeah.
And so your test work and your editorial work should look like the kind of work that you want to make for big brands.
Right.
Because not only is that what's on mood boards, but that's where your heart is. It's, or at least that's where your heart should be.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think too, this is in films, this is in photography, this is in advertising, this is in all creative, I think. When you go and you say, so what were you thinking this was going to look like? Most corporations, businesses are kind of like, they're not the creative. They're not really sure.
Right.
But if you bring the creative to them, if you show them something like what you're saying, they're like, oh, 100%, that's exactly what I wanted it to do. That's what I wanted. They don't know what they don't know. Like, they don't know how to create that, or they wouldn't be hiring us creatives to create it.
That's a really good point you bring up, because actually my mentor once told me, sometimes I know what's best for the client and they don't know what's best for the client or for themselves. And I think about that often, because they could come with an idea that you might execute or might not want to execute on set, but once they see what you're going for, you sometimes surprise each other. And I think there's a lot of magic in that. And also at the end of the day, you got to realize sometimes too that even if they really want something, like, they're hiring you for a reason. Because like you said, you have something to bring forth that no one else had. And so sometimes that means letting go of the main idea on set because you're both realizing something better is happening. Like, that's where it's really at.
100%.
And, you know, a lot of that credit goes to really good art directors that are on set that can understand that. Some people are very controlling. And, you know, I get that maybe because they have pressures that you don't know about. But at the end of the day, you know, you're there to make great work. I love the theme of letting go too, because I also at some point had to let go. I was once so obsessed with like equipment and like what kind of camera I was shooting with and the latest camera that was coming out.
I was too.
And I try to tell a lot of my friends to let go of the fact that they think they need this one camera to help their work get better. Like, we've been making pictures for a long time with really small film cameras, with point and shoot cameras. Like, award-winning pictures are made with any kind of camera. You just have to let go of it. And if you can be honest with yourself and think to yourself like, oh, I don't need that Fuji camera anymore that I walk around with every day because I think that's what makes my pictures good. Like, if you can be honest with yourself and give yourself a project that is bigger than that camera that you have in your hands, or bigger than you, like, then you're going to kill it no matter what camera you have.
Well, and creativity, and I think the edge that creative people have to bring to their projects is that seeing it differently than maybe what's out there. I worked in interior design for a long time, and it's that same creative art way. It's like, okay, everybody's doing cream and gray and their whole house is in this soft kind of vibe, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm bored of that week 2. You know, it's like, I need to put an edge on that somehow, but it doesn't exist. How do I make that? No, I'm going to put crisp black in it. So I started adding the crisp black into my design, where it put a harshness in the midst of this like soft palette.
Right.
And then it just gave a different vibe. You know, you kind of felt like relaxed, but clean. You know, I mean, it was just this different thing. It's the same thing I see in, you know, photography or media in its way. Is like, you got to put that little edge on it. There's a way that the market is going, but then that doesn't exist. So the customer that's coming to you may say, this is what we want. But you kind of have an edge as a creator to go, yeah, but what if we did this?
Sure.
Right.
And if you create that already in your treatment, you're almost one step ahead of showing them of like, hey, this isn't even out there yet, but this is an idea I have. Maybe you hit the mark, maybe you don't, but nonetheless, it's a jump off point, in my opinion, on, this is where we could go with that.
Here's a 30,000 foot view of that. But, I mean, in some ways everybody's got a perspective, everybody, especially as artists. You rob the world of something potential. I'm sure you studying film history or, art history, you could see that, you rob the world of a perspective by trying to emulate the next guy or try to emulate the style that's already out there. I mean, there might be something you're really inspired by. That's great.
Yeah.
But my gosh, if you let that just run a little bit deeper, a little bit more, I mean, there's something that, every style came from someplace. Every style didn't already exist. Everything kind of morphed as time went on, and to this day when we're pitching an advertising job, we're pitching a certain director or something for that job. It's because of the unique perspective. It's because of your eye, what you bring to the table, what your treatment. He mentioned treatment. I mean, the treatment is a director's take. It's him taking all this stuff in his head, taking maybe your idea or whatever you have, and then telling you what he sees and how he would execute and how he would do it stylistically. And that is valuable, and that's why these brands are paying so much to have people come and do that through their voice. If they didn't need the voices, if they didn't need the artists, if they didn't need the directors, they would do it on their own. But they're good at business and we're good at what we're good at. So.
Yeah, it's funny because I know that you and Orlando are friends. Orlando's been a guest on our show. And in passing in studio, y'all were chit-chatting. One of the things that we talked about on that episode was, he too got really like, I need this camera, and this is what I can do with this camera, and thought this camera was going to change his life. And then he's like, no, you know what? I'm going to make a reel with like 12 different cameras and shot with all different cameras, and then made it a game. Like, who can say what camera this was? Because ultimately you're saying it is not the camera that makes this, it is the creative behind the camera that makes it.
That's right. Because everybody was guessing, oh, that's the red camera, oh, that's the Epic, and everybody was wrong. And he was just like, see, it's not the point.
Yeah. And that's, essentially what you're saying is, find something, but don't make it the camera.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like, to me, a camera is just like a tool, right? It's just a paintbrush. Like, if you're going to paint the whole wall, you're not going to use a paintbrush to paint the whole wall. Yeah. There's different tools for different things. There's different cameras for different, situations. There's cameras if you need to shoot at 8,000 frames a second. Just as there are lenses that you're going to shoot, to shoot a first-person POV thing. Yeah. And so you can't obsess too much about those technical things, because this is another one of my favorite things about the industry. There's always going to be somebody that's better than you at something. Yeah. And when you can realize that as a director, you can really start trusting a lot of the people that you work with. So you can really start trusting a DP that will do the specific job really well, and that's why you bring on that DP. That's right. Because that DP has done sports, and they know how to shoot with a phantom camera, and they know what that all entails if they need to bring in extra support to run that camera. And so it's important to realize that, like, other people are better than you, because you can't do everything all at once. There's going to be better editors than me that have been doing it longer than I've been alive. Yeah. And when you can accept that, there's a lot of magic and there's a lot of beauty that can happen when you allow these people to show you that they're better than you at that job, but that if you do it together, that it's really, really special.
The symbiotic thing is huge. Too many people try to be an island, especially in our world, Western world, Hollywood, whatever you want to call it. It's all about making a name and doing all that. And that's really not where the good stuff happens. I mean, the collaboration is huge. The prima donna thing, it's just not it. I mean, every great director that I know, they're always talking about the people around them. Mm-hmm. They're always talking about the team. They're always talking about, I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it without.
That's
and
true.
they mean
couldn't.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They know they can't. Like, people see you. You don't know how many people are behind the scenes here making this happen. We didn't just show up and the light was here and the sound was here and this all sounds great and it's going to be colored right. And, I mean, it takes a lot, to do it all. So I love that. I love that you understand the beauty in that. And those are our favorite people to work with anyway, is the, people who get that collaborative process. And it's more fun to do it with family anyway. Going it alone is,
oh, absolutely.
That's no fun.
So as you progressed, where did you end up landing in your career that you just loved? And you were like, this is it. Like, you went from having a camera in 7th grade, started in the editing, started in the videoing, did photography, went to school for photography and all that. As you started practicing your craft, where did you land and what was the moment that you were like, oh, this is it? I truly enjoy this aspect, or I truly enjoy whatever it is that you really enjoy about the industry and what you do.
So I feel like I'm there now.
Yeah.
Two main things. I guess the first one is when I left to go to New York, I left my family here, and it was really tough to be there, but I knew going in that the end goal was always to leave New York. Like, it was always to sink my teeth into the industry. And once I felt good about it, then I can go back to Houston. And so a year before the pandemic, maybe, I felt that. And I felt it because I was only coming back to New York to sleep for a day or two, and then I'd go on to the next job. And so most of my jobs were all fly out jobs. And Houston has 2 great airports. One that's only 20 minutes away from here, I believe.
10.
Yeah.
10.
10. There you go. See, 10. And so, so I was like, well, I don't need New York. I don't need to be based in New York anymore.
Yeah.
And although it felt like a risk, going back to Houston just felt really good to have less overhead and to, again, chess moves, thinking ahead. I wanted to build the video side of my business because I was only mostly doing stills.
Okay.
And so when I came here, the pandemic hit a year later, and I was still working all throughout the pandemic. And I was like, okay, I'm going to double down. And so I bought a cinema camera. And now all of a sudden I'm immersed in this entirely different world where I have to learn coloring. I have to learn editing on an entirely different program. And it was a whole new language, but it was one that I always knew I wanted to be a part of. And no one else is going to make you do it. You have to do it yourself.
True.
And so I kind of forced my way into it in a way because all of my editorial clients, or even in my own test work, they'd call me and say, hey, we want stills of this, this, this. Okay, great. But we're also going to do video. Most of the time they'd say, oh, we don't have budget. But also 50% of the time they say, oh, yeah, let's do it. Here's more money.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I was kind of creating and opening these new avenues of revenue, but I was sticking to my guns, really sticking to my guns, because if they didn't have the budget for it, I was still spending money out of my own pocket to fly out DPs and to set them up in hotels so that we could shoot together and still provide the client with stills and with video. And so a lot of the time it would be where even if the client wasn't on set, I would still shoot the whole job, give them, the stills that they wanted, or as we talked about earlier, that they didn't know they were going to get. And we're like, well, this is a lot better than we thought. I'd say, hey, surprise, we made this too.
Wow.
So send them a video. Whoa, we want to buy that.
Did you ever, I mean, you had to have, through all that, considered the gamble that you were taking.
It's good that you're saying that, because for me, it's good knowing going in. For me, I never felt like it was a gamble, because for me, it was important to know that even if the client didn't want to buy that, it's going into my reel. And that to me is more valuable. Yeah. And what's more valuable to me is being able to work with a DP that I really care about, being able to make that work and for them to have work in their portfolio.
Yep.
And in that way, I'm not only building community, but I'm building my reel. And so when it's time to bid on the next job, hey, we got Chevy in there now, even though they didn't necessarily want video at first. They just wanted stills. But now we made this really compelling documentary shoot about this guy that owns this this like nonprofit. He takes these telescopes out into the desert and shows these kids like space. And we
get the smartest people on this show. That's all I'm gonna say. I mean, do you understand what he's saying?
But I hope it's understood. Like, I'm not saying it to like toot my own horn.
Right.
I'm saying it because it's possible, and like nobody else is going to make you do it unless you do it. And so all of my closest friends. I mean, like William was here the other day.
Yeah.
William Wood, love you.
We love William too.
And so, I tell him all of these same things when we're having, drinks together or when we're catching up. Like, and to me, like I said, that's the best way I feel like I can give back and like say thanks to my mentor is by helping other friends do this.
Yeah.
And, I'm one of those firm believers that there's enough work for everybody to go around.
Same.
And I feel like if there's people out there that are like, oh, they're stealing my jobs. It's like, no. It's like if you feel that way, there's something you're not doing right. Either you got to keep up with the ones that are getting those jobs, or you just need to network more, or you need to test more. Like you need to be out there.
There's plenty of work.
There's so much.
You know what I love about that? As you invested in you.
Absolutely.
And although you didn't say, okay, I believe in my own craft so much that you're going to want this video. And even if you don't, I still believe in my craft so much that that's going to propel me forward to get more jobs. I mean, the investment in yourself is amazing.
He wasn't doing it to be genius or had ulterior motives, but it was. I mean, it was still like he's doing everything he promised that client and more. But at the same time, it was going to be something that he loved, that he felt genuine about doing, and would also propel his future. It hit on so many levels that, like, so call it subconscious genius, whatever it was. It was great. That's a phenomenal. I mean, take notes.
Yes, I was going to say, take note of that.
That's good.
And I think that's been a lot of the guys and girls that we've had on here hearing. This is so my heart to help share these moments with our audience of like, these are all the different ways that all these guys that have been successful in the industry thought outside of the box. Didn't just take the answer at hand, didn't leave with excuses, didn't say, well, I don't know, everybody's taking my job, whatever. It was like, no, I know end game is I want to be here, so I'm going to go that extra mile. I'm going to do this extra, whether it's robotic arms, different cameras, shooting video when you're a still photographer. I mean, whatever that is betting on yourself, investing in yourself, doing that, and watching the gains happen from it. So
that's true.
I just think that's so great, and I don't think it is a toot your own horn by no means.
It's
as
not.
more as
It's
it
not.
is.
This is the humblest guy.
We are just so honored and blessed that you sat with us today on Set Life and told us your story, listened to your journey, all the brilliant nuggets that you've given us of wisdom, of your journey through this industry to arrive where you're at. If others watching want to find you, learn more about you, see your work, how do they do that? Where do they go?
So it's just my first and last name on IG, so Arturo Olmos.
And Instagram.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
Easy
go
enough.
check him out. Support his work. We're super thankful that you were here.
It's been
So
a pleasure. Thank you.
thank you. Until next time, we'll see you on Set Life.